Hey, team. Welcome back to another episode of the Jenn Commandments podcast. I'm your host, Jenn Wien. I'm an engineer currently working in Wisconsin. I grew up in the Chicagoland area and I went to college in Michigan. It's been a minute. It's almost been a full year, actually. So I've really taken some time. Hello. I've really taken some time to heal instead of just talking about healing. Anyway, okay, let me start off for real. So, hey y'all, how's it been? I hope you're doing very well. Happy 2025. I'm sorry that TikTok got banned. Maybe Big Daddy T will bring it back. I don't know. Big Daddy T sucks. So, anywho, so today we're going to talk a little bit about me because I've been gone for a full year. And then we're going to get into the topic of today, which is the perfect victim fallacy. So let's sort of get into it. I did make a script for myself. So if you see me referencing my iPad, that's what I'm doing. I'm checking it out. Let me throw the pen a little bit so we can look through. So I wrote, "Welcome to season 2. Like I said, I've spent the last year not just talking about how I needed to change, but actually making those changes." Isn't that right, Dante? So when I left nearly a year ago, I felt like I was in like a really creative rut. So this time last year, I didn't know whether I had brain cancer or not. I don't. It was just stress-related autoimmune disease. I have another MRI in April. It'll be in September, it'll be 2 years since the incident. So that's usually when you see another flare up for MS. So I'm really going to be taking a lot of time over the next year to be sure that everything is working the way it should, to see if I'm going to get another flare up. We'll see. I have been basically living my life normal though since I've gotten my diagnosis technically. So basically I had my brain thingy. So I had a lesion on my brain. So basically I was so stressed out that my brain thought that it was attacking itself. Or just kidding. So I was so stressed out that my brain started attacking itself because it thought that something was happening. And it thought that bad shit was going on. Anyway, so it ended up damaging some of the good tissue in my brain. When I get my MRI, they'll be able to tell whether or not the scar is there, whether the lesion is still there altogether. A year ago, it was still there, but I'm up and functioning. I don't really notice. But anyway, that was a whole other tangent. I didn't write any of that down. That was just that was where I was at this time last year. And so I was really, I was going through it and I didn't even know how to, I didn't have the language to discuss what I was going through. And it felt like every time I was coming up on this microphone here, I was just complaining and I was being depressed and I was just not creating the art that I felt that I wanted to put out in the world. My art is going to be commentary. It is not just complaining about the life that I've been given. I've been taught my whole life that complaining doesn't do anything. And as much as I was going through a lot and there was a lot to be discussed, I wasn't for sitting up on this microphone for an hour and bitching and having people listen to it and me calling it a podcast. That just was not, that wasn't in the cards for me. So I took the year off. There was a time where I did therapy sessions 2 times a week. I'm back to once a week. And I'm doing really, really good right now. And I think that space that I took, in addition to like being around people who love me, being around people who have had healthy relationships and friendships in their life, it's just been very good to take this last year and put it into myself. I don't think that I have ever taken a year, and even this doesn't count because we're going to get into public service and we're going to get into all sorts of stuff. 2025 is my year for me. Like I just hit the mic. I've never spent a full year just focused on the things, my goals, the things that I want without feeling like it was an obligation to do those things. And so for the first time this year, I'm doing things that I want to do for me, and for my passion. And so the podcast, obviously, I had to, like, this is a part of that. Like, I have finally gotten to a point in my life where I feel as though I'm a creative person and not a practical person. I think my creativity has been stifled my whole life because I was told that it wasn't profitable. It's not profitable to be creative unless you're like the best of the best. And operating out of fear like that, like, granted, I was blessed to be pushed to my limits in order to have a successful career and like that sort of thing. But I experienced a lot of burnout last year. And not like you would think that the stuff that we're going to get into today, like my old softball coach stuff, would contribute to that burnout. But that was what made me feel most alive. And so I sort of understood that like people are my passion, and I always knew that. But I don't know. I've never considered that people could be passionate towards me back, or like that it could be sort of like a give and take, not just like me feeling guilty about being creative, I guess. Like it's just like an afterthought. And so I don't know. So that's that on that. That was me over the last year. Let's see if I missed anything. So I just turned 26. It's currently Sunday, January 19th. I already sort of miss being 25. I think the transformation that I faced this last year while being 25, obviously I'm going to take it into the rest of my life, but I really figured out who I was this year. And I'm grateful for that. Like yeah. I wrote, for such a long time, I felt like I was never going to reap the benefits of busting my ass since I was little to create a safe space for myself in adulthood. Unfortunately, your old life is going to sink its claws into you before you can move into your new life and try to keep you stagnant. So the last year was very painful in a lot of ways, but this is also the most confident I've ever been in myself and my moral compass. So also, if you peep the towel under my blanket, fuck you. I spilled my water and I still wanted to record. I'm trying to record while the sun's still out because that's my natural lighting. So 25 was the most important year of my life. So I have finally stopped judging myself. I think what you hear a lot in my old podcasts is me still in that cycle of negative self-talk, putting so much pressure on myself to be perfect, to be what people expect me to be, instead of using my intuition and the moral compass that I already know that I'm proud of. I'm confident in who I am, in knowing what's right and wrong. And I think I wasn't before. I think I had been listening to a lot of people around me who benefited from me not being confident in myself, you know, like benefited from me not understanding what I bring to the table. And fuck all that, you know. I'm confident in who I am. I'm confident in what I stand for and who I know that I am and who that I've been and who that I'm gonna be. I like finally I've taken shame out of existing. And I think a lot of that stems from taking a hard look in the mirror and those things that you don't like about yourself, you need to make plans to change them. um that's it. You know, you really need to take a look in the mirror and be like, what about myself am I not happy with? Like for example, I did not like that I did not feel in control of my life. Like I took my power back, I took my voice back. I took everything about 16-year-old Jenn, who was like feisty, who was tenacious, who like maybe was a little quick to anger and maybe a little irrational sometimes. I was told for so long that that version of me was wrong. And like that girl who calls things out for what they are, that girl who like um stood up for what she believes in, like I, I had been told to water that girl down for such a long time. And I like, you know, fuck all that personally. Personally I don't subscribe to that anymore. And if you do, that's okay. But I hope that you find the confidence to just be yourself. Because it's really liberating. I'm sitting in my like apartment that I busted my ass my whole life for. And I know that everyone else busts their ass. That's not what I'm saying, but I never, like I said, I didn't, when I turned 25, I still had that helpless feeling of like, no matter how hard I work, it's never going to get better. I'm always going to be unhappy. And when you start to feel that way, you need to take a look in the mirror and be like, okay, but I'm in control. I'm the one here that's like in charge of this fucking bus, bro. Like I need to make myself happy again. And so you're happy for the first time. um so I've really been taking a lot of time and spending it with people who make me feel at ease, and not spending it with people who don't. Like simply, I guess, you know. What's next? Let's continue. So now, okay, shout out to my therapist for real. That was written in here. She has a whole paragraph. I said last time you all heard from me, I just started with her. She has single-handedly helped me change my life. I'm really grateful for the impact that therapy has had on me. And personally, I wouldn't be able to live a healthy adult life without therapy. Personally, I am a very self-aware person. I have been ridiculed since I've been sentient about existing in any sort of way. Both of my parents were very judgmental, and that's not to say like we'll get into mom stuff another day. But because both of their lives were rooted in guilt and shame and anger, that's how they raised me. And because of my therapist and because of me, because of what I've dedicated my life to getting out of the situation that I was born into, because of my therapist, because of me, because of everything, like I am breaking generations worth of family trauma by going to therapy, by healing those wounds, by deciding that I'm not going to be resentful the same way that my parents are. And I am to a certain extent. Like I'm 25. Like I still have, or sorry, I'm 26. I have a lot of time that I still need to grow in, obviously, but I know that if and when um I ever have a family of my own, and whatever that looks like, I do already have a family of my own, but whatever family looks like to me in the next phase of adulthood, will be endlessly grateful that I put in this work now. So that's that on that. Anyway, now with that being said, let's get into a relevant topic to my year. So, if you know me personally, you know that this last year I've had the privilege to help get my high school softball coach fired for over 25 years worth of sexual misconduct with students. If you know me since high school, you know how much this person has negatively impacted me and was a major reason I started hating softball and sports in general for a really long time. I actually resented sports until I was in Oregon. Everything that happened in Oregon was so traumatic that it it brought me back to sports in a weird way. Ronald Giglio and his clan ruined my relationship with sports. And obviously that relationship was strained to begin with. I partially played sports so that I could get a scholarship. I'm not a very if you know me, I'm not like a super competitive person. I don't really care about winning or losing. Most of the time I didn't know scores of my games when I was done. I wasn't like I either knew that we won or lost. I would never remember what I hit. I loved being there. I loved being there. I loved being around other people my age. Growing up, I was very uncomfortable with people my age because I had been through a lot and didn't really have anything in common with people my age because I had been parentified as a child. And so I often didn't have a lot in common with my peers. And so sports were a way for me to get along with people. It was just like, it was a way for me not to be at home because my home life was rough. And so when you have girls who join sports or go to school or, exist, um, and women just existing, you then are put in a place where you're supposed to be safe. You're supposed to be able to play sports without um external things ruining that for you. And those types of people, I'm sorry, excuse me. Those types of people, they prey on that, like in theory, right? If I had not been through sexual trauma, or if I did not know the warning signs of sexual harassment by the time I was in high school, so many of us, I think that when we think of victims, we think of them as these like infantilized people. Like when we hear the term victim, we think, oh, that poor little defenseless thing. When most victims I know don't even identify as such. Like most victims I know are the strongest, most like almost cold, and obviously oftentimes it is because of the trauma that they've been through that they are cold. But like most victims I know are not fucking these like we want a victim society. When I say we, I mean like mass society. I feel like we want to see a woman or a person. It doesn't have to be a woman. If I say woman throughout this whole thing, it is because frequently, most often, that is who it affects. Um, I think 100% of women have experiences with sexual harassment. And so it's just, when we hear victim, we think that this person should have been perfect. We think that this person should have always said no. We think this person should have never played into it. We think that this person should have always hated their victim, like, or hated their perpetrator. We just think that a victim should be whatever we think that they should be, right? And I think that when we have this discussion about sexual harassment, or when we have this discussion about victimhood or abuse, and like, it's not just sexual abuse that this resides in, this idea of a perfect victim. But oftentimes, I think sexualization is where we infantilize the most, weirdly, like, because sex in United States culture is seen as scandalous and like crude to talk about or whatever, that like, if somebody is a victim of sexual harassment, they cannot be inherently a sexual being, because then that means that they should have just wanted it, question mark. And I think that I realized that when I was in high school, I adhered to that. Like, when everything happened when I was in high school, my teammates, so here's what happened. So my teammate came to me. She was very upset. And I don't even remember when, like, I think she might have texted me the night that it happened, whenever I heard about it, right? Like, I remember being like, she was very uncomfortable, right? And she told me what was going on. We were going to a slam poetry thing for extra credit for English. um, and we were in the car going, and she was telling us, like, my mom drove me and her, and we discussed it together. And she was really bent out of shape. And I remember at the time, and this is admittedly, like, this is not to make me look good. This is this is honesty hour, bitch. This, on this here microphone on Elon Musk's internet, I am admitting that, like, I think at the time she was one of my best friends, but even still, because like, she was seen as the beautiful girl in school, she was like bubbly and flirty, I was like, yeah, whatever. And like, I stood up for her, and like, I loved her, and I, like, whatever she felt, I was gonna follow and stick up for her. But I think that we need to reflect on that ideology. We need to reflect on why a woman being friendly and kind and maybe aware of her beauty, like, we need to stop shaming confident women for being confident. And I let's get into that, cuz I've been trying to write this well. I wrote for like an hour and a half for the script, and I wanted to explain this with word, like, with my mouth instead of typing, just cuz I felt that I couldn't explain it well in words. And that means that it, like, obviously this needs to be thought about. And it's okay, like, I'm giving you, like, permission as a listener to, I know that you're the only one, maybe, and maybe you're listening it with people, I don't know. But I want you to look at yourself and be like, hey, when has there been a time where I haven't been empathetic to somebody's trauma the way that I should have been? And I wrote in here, how do I know the difference between doing something because it's the right thing to do and I know that, or and like I want to, and it aligns with how I feel. It aligns with who my moral compass is. And then discussing, when do we do things, or have we done things because we wanted to be perceived as good. And I think even thinking about back then, right? Now, like I'm far removed from high school. I have no vested interest other than to save kids or like to protect kids. But like back then, this was my whole universe. Like Bloom Trail High School was that was as big as my world was at that point. Like that was everything to me. And so I think back then, if we're being honest, if I'm, being curt for the class, I feel like back then I probably cared more about being perceived as good. And I think that aligns with how I treated my teammate, my friend afterwards. Um and that's something I obviously feel guilt for, but it's something that I wanted to unpack for other people, because I want to talk about how, because human beings are imperfect, there's never going to be a perfect fucking victim. Like you're never, if we're discussing like even the Giglio lawsuit with Jane Doe, right? This is something I don't like speaking on. Jane Doe is a warrior as far as I'm concerned. I was also in contact with Jane Doe's ex-husband for a long time as well, when we were going through everything. And admittedly, there were times that he didn't support his ex-wife. And that's why I wanted to discuss this, right? Like Jane Doe's story is that I believe when she was a sophomore in high school, she she started to have a entanglement with her teacher Ronald Giglio, and she would practice soccer with him. He would keep her in his back room. Like Giglio, if you interacted with Ronald Giglio, you know his ploys, you know his tactics, you know how he's going to attack, and all of our stories, all of us girls who have interacted with Giglio have the same stories. And so to me, obviously these things happened, right? But especially because this happened in 1999, so many people were like, why does it fucking matter? And do you want to know why it fucking matters that she filed a lawsuit? Because then I got to make a Facebook post, and then other people got to make Facebook posts, and now he's fired. That's why it fucking matters. So I don't want to hear anybody ever say anything of like, why didn't they say something sooner? Because when I did say something, the moment that it happened, nothing still happened. Like, it doesn't matter if the victim says something exactly when it happens. It doesn't matter if the victim, like, for example, one of the comments that I got when I made my Facebook post was I referenced that Ronald Giglio would invite a special girl to ride with him to Bloom for softball practice. I was very infrequently that special girl because I had a smart ass mouth and I was too smart for Ronald Giglio. Ronald Giglio really, really resented me, actually, because I was smart. That was something that we argued about quite frequently. He was very insecure. I could tell even then that I made him insecure. But anyway, he made a pass at me the first time that we were in his car. And I remember he drove me through like the abandoned part of Chicago Heights. Like, really, I felt really like not targeted, but I felt cornered when I rode in the car with Giglio. That was not, it was why I didn't, like, I was only invited to do it twice. The first time I was very rude to him when he made his little remark. And it was just something about working my legs out because I was a catcher. Like, it was just very, and it was implicit. It wasn't like you trying to, like, it wasn't any, like, but that's anytime that your gut reaction is uncomfortability, you need to listen to that. And I think that people undermine those gut reaction. Like, you have fucking survival, you're an animal, bitch. You have survival instincts. Okay? So if you're in this bitch and you're like, I I don't like what's happening here, then you're probably not wrong. And you probably need to listen to that instinct. But I was very sarcastic with his pass, and obviously this is not, that's not, Giulio's a narcissist. Like, not being like, I don't know, he did not expect a fucking 15-year-old girl to clap back at him, is the point, right? And so he took it out on me for the rest of my college career, or not college, the rest of my high school career. Like, I would shake while I was up to bat because I was so scared of Giulio. Like, he made my life a living hell every school softball season. I fuck him. And so, you know what? Um Karma's a bitch. Anyway, so let's get back into the victim. Sorry, I keep going on tangents, but Miss Jane Doe, at the beginning of everything going down, her ex-husband was very, very supportive and was the main way that I, quote unquote, had any contact with Jane Doe. I don't know who Jane Doe is. Let me make that abundantly clear. I have no idea who Jane Doe is. I do know who her ex-husband is. But like, I also don't give a fuck. I'll be completely honest. I fell into this. Like, it's not like I do have a vested interest because I care about kids' safety, but I care about the right thing happening. I care about the right thing happening in part because there's a part of me obviously that feels guilty about not being a better friend sooner. Like, I feel guilty about even having those thoughts about my old friend. Like, that she's pretty, that she's flirty, like, is it that like, yes, of course. It, like, I was so sucked into that same hater, like, not haters like an unserious but like, I just did not understand at the time. I didn't have the language to, I think as human beings, we really want it to be black or white. Like, we really want it to either be like, damn, that sucked, or it didn't. Like, that's just similarly, like, Giulio's probably not all a bad guy, right? Like, in theory, like, to decide that every single thing that Ronald Giulio's ever done has come from a nasty place because of what's happened is wrong. But to also give him any grace because he did do this for over 25 years is like, that's fucking crazy. And I guess that there's a part of me that also fell into the perfect victim fallacy because I didn't know. I obviously, there's a part of me on a subconscious level. Okay. For context, right? For context, when I was a junior in high school, we had a softball team that was pretty good. We had a lot of seniors and we had a lot of juniors. We knew when I was a freshman, we had 2 freshmen who moved up to varsity when I was a freshman because their parents talked to Giulio. No tea, no shade. That's just what it is. If you know how to network, you know how to get what you want, right? And if you have parents who are willing to network for you, period, right? And so our softball team was good, and we had a specific girl who was very good, she'd always been a good softball player our whole lives, right? I've been playing softball since I was in 4th grade. She was always somebody that I looked up to. And it's so hard because high school softball really ruined a lot of my relationships that were really important to me growing up, you know? But anyway, Gilio had a very obvious crush on this player. And Gilio's family would come to our games and like do nothing but talk about her the whole time. And so that's another, even now, right? Even now, as I talk about it, you can still tell I have resentment for the situation. And like, that sucks. That totally sucks because there's a part of me that still feels that anger and that need to like clench in for that perfect victim fallacy and like not feel bad for her because she didn't stick up for us, not feel bad for her because like, and that's not okay. Like, she's a very similar person to Tressa, or she's a very similar person to my teammate. And I had that same feeling where I was like, well, and I don't know, is some of it jealousy? Is some of like this situation, this activism, this whatever that's happened over the last year, has really forced me to like sit there and be like, let's look in the mirror and let's analyze why you were angry at a girl for being sexually assaulted by your coach. Like, why is it that you still found a way to be angry at the man in that situation, or angry at the girl in that situation? And like, it is because as a society, or like me personally, I've been led to believe that like, unless somebody is perfect, then they shouldn't deserve empathy. And I like, girl, fucking evaluate that. That's fucking crazy. But you know, it sucks. It sucks. That's not fair. It's not fair that I'm angry at her even still, that she still won't talk. Like, damn, you know, like all I want from this time period. And I do want to reach out to all of them, all those girls, all of my old teammates, and be like, you know, I'm sorry that everything happened the way that it did. And I know that the way that I handled those things were not graceful. And I was a teenage girl just like they were, but I was making an already hard time for them probably harder by being quick to anger, by seeing the patterns that aren't cool, and instead of being angry at the people who are the reason why those patterns are in effect to begin with, I was angry at the victims. And that's bullshit. And so I hate to bring it back to like Jane Doe's ex-husband. um but I'm gonna, because I don't mean to call him out like on this podcast, but this woman has been primed and prepped by a man who had a position of power over her since the beginning of their relationship, for over 25 years. And regardless if she tried to have a relationship with him after or not, there's no way for her to ever, for that power dynamic to ever become equal, because they met each other in a time where that was the dynamic, and therefore that's going to be the dynamic forever. Like, and that's not to say that dynamics of relationships can't change, but we're talking about Ronald Giglio here. We're not talking about a normal person. We're talking about a predator. We're talking about a pedophile, right? And so we can't expect normal behavior from abnormal people. And so I implore anyone, and I don't mean to just call out him, I implore anyone that has something that like something happened to them, and for some reason you feel angry at them about it because your like, to give myself grace, right? To give myself grace, like, I was a teenage girl and my perception of the situation was this person was in charge of, could be the reason why I do or don't go to college and play softball. And it ended up happening where, like, I hated softball so much by the end of high school that I could not. Like, I the drama that surrounded softball became so loud to me that I just could not even fathom doing that at the collegiate level, you know? And that's unfortunate. Like, it is unfortunate that somebody who just loved being a part of a team and loved not being home, um, to drive them away from something that they like. I loved, for better or for worse, I loved softball. I loved being there. I loved being dirty. I loved all of it, and I just hated it by the end, and that sucks. Like, um, I hope that you evaluate your anger when you're angry. I hope that you evaluate your resentment when you feel it, because that resentment that I had felt towards my teammates, that wasn't towards them. It was towards the situation that I had been thrust into. And they had just also been a victim of the same thing, but in a different way. And it's hard. It's hard. To be a woman, that's it. Actually, I don't have anything more to say. It's rough. Let me look at my notes. I guess the major point here, again, just to reiterate, is that why do we think that victims need to be something? Why do we think that in order for a bad thing to happen to you, you have to be a good person first? Why can't bad things happen to bad people too? You know? Because is anyone really all good or bad? Like, no. And so I implore you to have empathy for your peers. I implore you to be kind to your peers. I implore you to listen to them when they speak, and to see them. I see them as a human being and not just what they represent to you. Because I think my teammate, I was mad that I said Tressa before, but she's come out and said that it's her. So I feel comfortable saying her name. But Tressa was one of my best friends in high school. We both had very similar upbringings. And I let her down when and she doesn't even know about this, but like, karma knows, the universe knows, like, I let her down by not feeling empathy the way I should for her, at the time. And that showed with the way that I handled our friendship after I stood up for her. Like, maybe I resented her for standing up for her too. I don't know. But I do, I want you to take my lessons, or like what happened to me, and like take it as your own. Sometimes when you're doing the right thing, you have to take a step back and make sure that you're doing the right thing because you want to be doing the right thing, and not because you want it to look like you're doing the right thing. Because at the end of the day, it's always going to show. You're always going to be able to tell whether or not somebody actually gives a fuck about what you're talking about. People are very intuitive. Like, humans pick up on social cues, and so we've unpacked it all, she and I. We've gotten the opportunity to discuss all that, which has been a really healing part of this year for me. I've gotten to talk to people from that time in my life, originally high school is a very traumatizing time of my life. I between other things that happened, I rekindled with some very important people this last year because of what happened. And I've rekindled with people that I didn't even get along with in high school, really. I feel really blessed that the community really came together for this. And it is because of the community that I got to learn these lessons, and I got to take a step back and evaluate who I am and what my my intentions are or whatever. And if there were ever times where my motives weren't positive, then I got to take a step back and be like, well, here's a time where now that your motives are positive. So let's be fucking for real with it then. Because if my motives were real back then, I would have been doing what I'm doing now then. Let's be real about it. If I really gave a fuck. I mean, obviously I was 18, I didn't really have the language for it, but no, babe, we're protecting those kids now. I couldn't protect trust. Not that it was my job, but those were my girls. Those were my teammates. There's like I said, I had a hard time at home. And so in a lot of ways, any team that I was on was like my family, because I felt like I didn't have one. And I know now that back then I didn't know how family was supposed to treat each other. I had never seen that. And now I get to know that those people that I consider family now, I would never do those things to. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I even made any points for real. But let's look. I just I don't know how much I'm gonna talk about the Gilio stuff day to day in normal podcasts, and I would feel weird not addressing it at all. So I'm addressing it in the only way I know how, which is to reflect. Reflect on how my actions and how my thoughts and feelings have changed. And I think the biggest point of growth for me because of this time has been to love and not to be corny about it, but we really are all amalgamations of trauma and life experiences, both positive and negative. And it's time to embrace one another for those things and to not shame people for those things, and to be there to support in a real way, in I'm not making this my problem, but I'm here to support you way. Which is a balance, obviously, that I still struggle with. But I feel like I've gotten a lot better over the course of this year. I think when everything first popped off, I took a few vacation and or sick days to accommodate protesting, to accommodate court sessions that I wanted to go to, etc. And I think at the time I didn't know that this was going to be a long I don't know. I've never, other than my parents' divorce, I've never really witnessed legal proceedings, and so I didn't know how long something like this takes. And so I was so all in right at the beginning, partially because I felt all of those things. I felt angry because no one protected us. I felt slighted because I feel like a victim of Gilio. I felt guilty because I didn't think that I was a good friend to my teammates. There was just a million feelings I had surrounding high school, surrounding that specific situation, and to have the opportunity to make it right, to be like, okay, I didn't have any power back then, and I don't really know if I have any power now, but I do know that I have language, and I do know that I know how to communicate, and so I can use that. I can do my best to know that I'm making the impact that I wanted to make back then, but also now it's being done for reasons that come from truly caring about other people instead of caring about the way that you're perceived, which is something that I've completely stopped caring about this year, sort of. Like, obviously, I care a little bit how I'm perceived. Like, I've really been anxious about recording this podcast. And part of the reason why you haven't gotten one is because, like, the thought of recording myself and then having to edit truly makes me want to throw up. But on like and I'm working through all that. Hey, I'm still in therapy. But to finally feel confident in my moral compass and be like, I know that I care about people and I don't really give a fuck about how I'm perceived, actually. Part of this Gilio stuff really aided there was times where things were happening so quickly that I couldn't care. Usually I take a step back, I plot, I'm like, what's going to be the best plan of action? Like, I'm a very calculated person. If we're being 100% honest, I'm trying to be less calculated. But what I mean by that is, like, I take long pauses before I speak. So I just, like, so much of my life, what I say, what I do has been used against me later, that I'm very fucking careful, right? I grew up in a place where my parents, either one, were watching me like a hawk. And, like, if I did something wrong, obviously I was going to hear about it. So I'm very calculated. I was. I've grown to care about that less over the years, or over the last year specifically, because obviously I'm going to treat people with respect and kindness. But, like, if I'm having this internal turmoil because of your actions, bitch, you're going to hear about it. I don't care. I don't care. Like, I simply have almost died. No, that's dramatic. But I got an autoimmune disease, bitch, from being stressed out. And so it's out of my hands. It's out of, like, I know what my intentions are, and I trust my intentions now. I think that's the difference between me now and me then, is I didn't believe back then that I had good intentions. I was still told to think that I was just like my dad. Like, yeah, I don't know. Bitch, don't be judging victims. I'll whoop your ass. I don't know. That's it. I don't know how much more I'm going to talk about Gilio, or I'm going to talk about the situation moving forward. I'll be honest. It's not something I think about a lot unless unless something happens, right? I will be present for the trial. I'm going to be there. I don't know if I'll be there in person, but I will be there on Zoom for sure. And I think finally, this is the last thing, I swear. Sorry I've been talking your ear off. It's been a while. But I think that this year really allowed me to actually lost it. I don't know what my train of thought was now. Fuck, it probably doesn't matter that much. It totally does, though. I was like, I totally need to say this before I leave. Oh, I learned this year to lean on people. Before this year, or this last year, I leaned on two people. I leaned on my mom, or three. I leaned on my mom, I leaned on my brother, and I leaned on Kayla. And that is insurmountable pressure to put on 3 people and not to mention, like, I was pretty unstable. Like, for 3 people to, like, take care of this inner turmoil, bitch, like, that's a hefty task. And I think I learned this year that, like, everyone needs people. Like, it is a very human thing to need help. It is a very human thing to require assistance while existing. And so being able to be like, I actually don't want to have the brain power to have to figure this all out by myself. I want help. Has been life-changing. So I am so grateful for the people who I have tried to trust and, like, really put myself out there by asking them for something and them not making me feel crazy for needing something. That's been really cool to establish a family that doesn't make me feel terrible for needing that. Like, I am so grateful for the community of people that I have accumulated over the last year. And it hasn't just been over the last year that I've accumulated these people, but the people that, like, I loved but didn't maybe trust to be there for me, which is not their fault. That is, like, an inner thing. Like, I just have problems with trusting people. The people that I've tried to let in and they haven't disappointed, like, I'm so grateful for me putting myself out there is all, you know. So that was the final thing that I wanted you guys to know was you should ask somebody for help. You should ask a motherfucker for some help. They'd be happy to give it to you. People who love you want to help you. Did you know that? Anyway, so that's it. I think I'm over it. I think I'm done. All right. I love you guys so much. Thank you. Welcome to season 2. Welcome to video episodes. It's crazy. I am incredibly grateful for the life that I've gotten to live, and that I continue to live. And I will continue to be creative and I will continue to foster that creativity so that I can be the best version of myself, not only for myself, but so that I can post myself yapping in my apartment. So gang gang. Love you guys so bad. Let's see you next time. Hopefully that's reasonable in a reasonable time, but we'll see. All right, that's it. Let's stop.